Hey, everybody, welcome to our virtual Bible study. We are so glad you've tuned in to be with us tonight. And if you're following our current series on wisdom for life, a topical study of the book of Proverbs, tonight we are on lesson number 10. So if you need some background information and you're just jumping in, you're welcome to watch the video. It does kind of stand alone, it's just one subject matter, but if you want the context to it, I would encourage you to go back and also view lessons 1 through 9. And there's more than 9 particular videos, but there are 9 lessons prior to this one. And I would encourage you, especially the first couple where we're talking about what the Proverbs is about. And they're very foundational, fundamental for everything that we're discussing. But tonight is lesson number 10. And tonight we're talking about alcohol, wisdom about alcohol. And I should say today, because you can view this anytime. It doesn't have to be nighttime that you view it. Now, before we do our lesson, I would like to encourage you to do a couple of things for us. It's our standard operating procedure. If you're on our YouTube channel, do us a favor and hit that subscribe button right below the video. We'd love to boost subscription to make us more visible on YouTube. We're not monetized. We don't make money off of it. It's not like we're somehow secretly putting money in the pockets from what you're doing. Absolutely free to you. We don't make money off of it, but we do want to get the video out there because we believe God's truth should be present. It should be out there. So please help us to project truth to the world. And then if you're on Facebook, help us by sharing the video on your timeline. So if you can hit the share button, and I'm not sure where it's going to, sometimes it's right below the video. It's going to be off. As I look at my screen, it's sort of below it and off to the right. But you hit the share button, and it's a wonderful thing because everybody on your timeline now has access to the video, and we're a public page, so we don't have like a friends list. So you help us out to get in contact with people that we would not otherwise have contact with if you do that for us. And we appreciate it. We really do. And thank you for the encouragement. It's always encouraging to be here, to see the number of people that engage the videos. Just, it's a really great thing. All right, straight to the lesson. Lesson number 10, wisdom about alcohol. What we like to do in this class, because in our live discussion, we go over the same questions. It's just there's open discussion and feedback from everybody that's in the auditorium when we discuss this. So this is one of those take it home, study it, bring back your own thoughts type of an outline. And I can't do that here because this is not a live format. We have no way of going back and forth. So I am going to read the questions and then we'll just talk through the answer to the questions. All right, so here's question number 1 or statement number 1. Like so many other areas of trouble in the Proverbs, Solomon warns of the dangers of alcohol. Is alcohol still a problem in our culture today? Who does alcohol affect? And is it just older people? Or is it just the drinker that is affected by alcohol? So I want to go over some statistics. These I have found to be the most recent statistics I know of, so they're pretty fairly accurate, I would say. I know a lot can change in a year or two since they've come out, but I think it's a pretty fair assessment of where we stand. I wouldn't say in the world because I'm really just talking about our context, the United States. So these stats are United States stats, but I do think they fairly represent where we are at in regard to the issue of alcohol. So here's the most current statistics. It is suggested that 86.3%, I mean, this is a lot of folks, a lot of the American population. When you say 86.3% of the American population, a ton of people, right? Because if you're talking, what are we, 350-ish million people in the United States, 86%, 86.3% is a lot of folks. This is 86.3% of the people who are 18 years and older, right? So that's still a lot of people have consumed alcohol in their lifetime. That means that the vast majority of adult people, almost all adult people, have had access to alcohol, have at some point consumed alcohol. Only a very small percentage have not actually ever taken alcohol into their system. 70% of the same group drink pretty regularly within the year. 55.3% drink frequently. So you have almost half of the American adult population that drink regularly, frequently. About 33% fall into the category of heavy drinkers, binge drinkers. But it's not just an older folks problem, right? So you can say, well, it's 18 and above, you're talking about adults. It's not really a child problem, but it is a child problem. Of those between the ages of 12 and 20, now there are stats for below 12. There are a lot of people below the age of 12 that have had access to alcohol, and some have serious issues because of access to alcohol. But these are stats for 12 to 20-year-olds. It is suggested that 13.2 million, that's out of our entire American population, right? 13.2 million have tasted alcohol. They've tried it. And I would say if people were really honest, it'd probably be higher than that, because I know of a lot of kids between the ages of 12 and 20 who have had access to alcohol and have tried alcohol. 3.2 million, and this is between the ages of 12 and 20 years old, 3.2 million admit to regular binge drinking, heavy alcohol use. And 7.1 million would suggest they're regular drinkers. They wouldn't call themselves binge drinkers, but you have around 7 million kids between the ages of 12 and 20 who just drink alcohol regularly. And about over 3 million that say they are binge drinkers, heavy users of alcohol. There are currently in the neighborhood of about 500,000 kids in the United States that are alcoholics. And about 20% of all college students admit to being alcoholics, alcohol dependent. So is it a problem? Absolutely, it's a problem. It is absolutely a problem. Almost 90,000 people die every single year in the United States due to some alcohol-related incident. It makes it the third most preventable type of death in the United States. The first one is tobacco. The second is, they say obesity, but it has to do with diet and exercise. A lack of it is the second most preventable death in the United States. But the third is alcohol, the third most preventable death. 31% of all driving fatalities are due to alcohol. Economically, it costs America about $250 billion a year to pay for the abuses of alcohol that are present in our society. In family relationships, it's suggested that about 10% of all U.S. children live with a parent that is alcohol dependent. So about 10% of all kids in America have at least one parent that is an alcoholic. And there are tons of risk factors involved. There's the stunting of brain development and the destruction of brain cells. The risk of sexual assault. Lots of sexual assaults happen, either committed or happen to people because of alcohol. There are diseases like liver disease, cirrhosis. There's cancers of the mouth, esophagus, pharynx, larynx, liver, and breast cancer can sometimes be related to alcohol. And then impaired judgment. I mean, we're just talking about catastrophic mistakes and deep regret that come from that. And then from a practical perspective, right? We've probably all seen the very ugly effects of alcohol in the lives of people that we know. I have known plenty of guys who've had DUIs, right? They drink, they drive, they get caught, they have DUIs. When I was in the military for a number of years, and a lot of guys that I served with had DUIs. They'd go out drinking on a Friday night and come back into base, and the MPs would pull them over and they'd get DUIs. A lot of them got local police to pull them over and had DUIs that way. Fights. I saw so many fights when I was in the Army, all because of alcohol. The inability to do a person's job. I saw people just incapacitated to do their work. Injuries. I saw some of the stupidest things I've ever seen in my life that people did because of alcohol. and they injured themselves terribly, things they never would have done. They had no discretion, so they just did things that ended up causing serious injury. Uh, a lot of guys I knew were just constantly broke. They spent all their money. Like they could get a paycheck, and within one night, their paycheck was gone spending money on alcohol. It's a terrible thing. Had one associate of mine in the military. He had multiple DUIs, and he was attached to my platoon, and we were close in the sense that we were friendly with each other, and we depended upon each other. He had my back and I had his, like everybody in our platoon and in my squad especially. Um, but he was just constantly drinking. He got married. It destroyed his marriage. And he made stupid decisions. He ended up cheating on his wife a number of times. He would get drunk and be with other women, and it destroyed their marriage and destroyed the childhood of the kids they had in that marriage. It was just an awful thing. I saw what alcohol does. When I preached in Georgia, I knew a man who was the son of one of the families that attended. There was an older couple that was there, and they had a son. He was an alcoholic. He would call on the phone all the time, and he would beg for help. And I tried to get him into counseling programs. He never would do it. And he was so desperate on occasions that he would go, and all he could afford would be Listerine or NyQuil, and he would, because of the alcohol content, and it was small in those things, but he would drink Listerine, just down it, and do the same thing with NyQuil just to get the slightest relief of his taste for alcohol. It was an awful situation. And we know plenty of people. I've known plenty of people who've been killed by drunk drivers, and known people who have killed other people because they were the drunk drivers. Alcohol, from a practical perspective, is not a great thing. Now, let's talk about the Proverbs. What does Solomon say about all of this? All right, so in the Proverbs, he offers some very pointed warnings about the dangers of alcohol. And they're in no particular order, but I am going to look, first of all, at Proverbs chapter 21. Proverbs 21. Proverbs 21. And let's take a look at verse 17. Proverbs 21, verse 17. He who loves pleasure will be a poor man. Now watch carefully. Verse 17. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. He who loves wine and oil will not be rich. Why does he say that? Wine and oil here. Well, wine and oil are sort of representative of feasting. They're representative of feasting and banqueting. But it stands remotely for excess, right? So he's talking about just excessive type of behavior. Alcohol is almost always connected to excessive behavior, a good time, as people like to say they're having when they drink alcohol, which comes at great expense. It's very expensive to do that. Not just in your health and in stupid decisions, but financially, it's very costly to do that. And because it is so associated with the good time, that one ends up setting aside work in order to accommodate for pleasure, which leads to poverty. That's what that verse is talking about. So he's warning us about dangers that are inherently connected to alcohol, this life of excess and poverty that comes from that because there's a mismanagement of life. In Hebrews 11, verses 24 to 26, he talks about the pleasures of sin for a season. That definitely fits Proverbs 21, verse 17. Then chapter 23, there's a lot said about alcohol in chapter 23. In fact, that's where I just left my Bible marker there because that's where so much of his warning comes. First of all, look at verses 20 and 21. Do not mix, he says, do not mix with winebibbers or with gluttonous eaters of meat, for the drunkards and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe a man with rags. So this is, I think it's a lot like the previous verse, chapter 21, verse 17. That there's this general warning against wine and drunkenness, and here he also connects it to associations. Don't associate with people who are drinkers like this. So there are general warnings in the Bible about alcohol. Isaiah 5:22, Matthew chapter 24, verses 48 to 51, Romans 13, verse 13, about being associated with wine bibbers and drinkers and things of that sort. Ephesians 5:18, don't even grow drunk with wine wherein is excess. And he sort of brings this principle out, which we know to be true practically. We've seen it in the lives of drinkers, that people spend a small fortune for a life of excess, for bad habits. And bad habits make people lazy. And so he's talking about that at the end of the passage. The drowsiness will clothe the man with rags. He's talking about a lazy lifestyle. And that happens because it tends to cause one to crave pleasure. And it's a warning against some of the dangers. Now he'll get a lot more graphic in his warnings as we go through. So same chapter, drop down to verse 29 and verse 30. There are 6 questions here. They're rhetorical in the sense that they're answered in verse 30, but he says, who has woe, who has sorrow, who has contentions, who has complaints, who has wounds without cause, and then number 6, who has redness of eyes. Now the answer is in verse 30. Those that linger long at the wine, those who go in search of mixed wine, right? They're after intoxicating beverages. They're going to find out the answer to those 6 questions. But notice these. He said, who has woes? That would be physical woes, social woes, financial woes, addiction, penalties that follow as a result of alcohol. He said, who has sorrow? This would be the injury of self and the injury of others. Who has contentions? I can put names down of people I've seen drink a little alcohol and end up being in a fighting mood. They never would have done that otherwise. We'll talk about the reason for that in just a moment. People are argumentative when they drink. They like to fight when they drink. You see it all the time. You see clips of it online all the time. At a ball game, somebody's been drinking and something happens and they end up with a fight with another person. They never would have done that if they not been drinking. There's complaints. Who has complaints? Complaints here would be complaints over the way somebody's treated or the way somebody treats them. Wounds without cause. These would be self-inflicted wounds, meaning that these are avoidable problems, but they are natural. They are inherent within alcohol use. And the redness of eyes. This is the abuse of the body and what happens internally that you can't see. But here's just the outward abuse of the body that you see. The redness of the eyes, all the passing out, the drunken stupor, all of that is the outward effect of alcohol. Then verses 31 and 32. He says, do not look on the wine when it is red, when it sparkles in the cup, when it swirls around smoothly. At the last it bites like a serpent and stings like a viper. Now, this is interesting. He says in verse 31, don't even look at the alcohol. You're not going to get in trouble if you don't even look at it, which would certainly be don't use it. Don't use alcohol. I mean, there's a legitimate, like medicinally, it can be used medicinally, but otherwise the Bible is very plain. Don't get involved in alcohol. Don't do it. And he says, don't look at it when it's red. See, people who drink often appreciate the color of the alcohol or the taste of it. And he's saying to avoid that altogether, don't even look at it. Don't even be enticed by alcohol. Because in the end, the serpent's sting, he said it ends badly. It may look good, but it has fatal consequences, just like a deadly snake would have fatal consequences. Proverbs 23, verse 33. Your eyes will see strange things, and your heart will utter perverse things. What does that mean? It means it dulls the perception, and from the heart, through the mouth, comes vulgarity. You want to hear somebody cuss? Let them start drinking. You want to hear foul, coarse language? Let them start drinking. Some people are just rude, mean, argumentative, embarrassing when they drink. There's no restraint in their speech. That's what he's talking about. Then in verses 34 and 35, he says, yes, you'll be like the one that lies down in the midst of the sea, or like the one who lies at the top of the mast saying, they've struck me, but I wasn't hurt. They've beaten me, I didn't feel it. And then he says, when shall I awake that I may seek another drink? And so, kind of like the ship here, they're tossed to and fro. The room spins around, they vomit. I mean, that happens when you drink. they stagger, there's uncertainty, and they don't feel pain because their senses are dulled, and they pass out. These are all very true effects of drinking alcohol. Then in Proverbs 31 verses 4 and 5, at the end of the book, he says, "It is not for kings, O Lemuel. It is not for kings to drink wine, nor for princes intoxicating drink, lest they drink and forget the law." See what he's pointing to? He says, "And pervert justice of all the afflicted." See, the forgetting of the law and the perversion of justice here is a reference to the mental effect of alcohol. It definitely impairs judgment. It's an interesting fact. It doesn't take but just a few drops of alcohol to start impairing your body. As little as 0.01, that's pretty little, 0.01 to about 0.05 blood alcohol content. And I mean, that's not a whole lot. It's just a little bit. It affects communication pathways. It affects balance and memory and speech and judgment. It's called subliminal intoxication. You don't even know you're intoxicated, but your judgment is impaired. When I was in the military, one of the things they constantly worked on, and I illustrated earlier why, was how terrible it was to drink and drive, because so many of our people were drinking and driving. And so they wanted to illustrate how it was such a terrible thing. And our CO, our company commander, got us together in a room one day, and he said, "We're going to run a test." He goes, "I've put a cone course outside in the parking lot." We all looked out in the parking lot, and he had a car sitting out in the parking lot, and I think the sergeant major was out there, and he had the keys to the car, and he was just kind of hanging out. And the CO had brought us in, and he said, "I've run a cone course. It's wide enough to get a car through. You're gonna drive through, turn around, and come back through the cone course." He said, "Here's the catch. One of you is going to drink a shot of whiskey, and then you're going to do it." So we're all sitting in the room. He had, I think it was whatever he had, Jack Daniels or something like that, and he poured a shot glass, set it on a table. He goes, "I need one volunteer." And at first everybody was kind of hesitant to do it because they didn't want to drink in front of the CO, but he told them to do it. So we had one guy volunteer, and I think we volunteered a guy to do it. And he takes a shot, just one small shot. It wasn't a whole lot of alcohol. Just takes a shot. Made him sit there about 10 to 15 minutes so the alcohol would be in his system. Everybody went outside. We weren't even standing up in the rooms watching. We all went outside. We were all standing around, sitting behind the wheel of the car. He said, "All right, now I want you to navigate your way to one end of the cone course, turn around and come back." How many cones do you think he hit? I can tell you the truth. I promise you, he hit every single cone. He wasn't even trying to. He was impaired after just one shot of alcohol. And I think that it's been such a powerful point to me since that time that it doesn't take anything, just a small amount of alcohol, and your judgment is impaired. That's what the writer of the Proverbs is talking about, how that judgment gets impaired through alcohol use. That's a danger. It's a dangerous thing to lose control of your mind. Now, what is is the third point. What is his overarching conclusion about alcohol? So go back to Proverbs 20, verse 1. "Wine is a mocker. Strong drink is a brawler," right? "And whosoever is led astray by it is not wise." So what does he mean when he says wine is a mocker and strong drink is a brawler? And those words are parallel. They mean the same thing. Strong drink is the wine he's talking about here. He's talking about intoxicants. So what does he mean by a mocker? Because it makes a fool out of the person that uses it. It makes a fool out of them. And when he says a brawler, he's just talking about how it brings people to contention, that they begin to be quarrelsome and they fight. And they're things that people probably wouldn't otherwise do, but they do it because their senses are so dulled. And then he says, "Whoever is led astray by it is not wise." Now, the force of that statement is something like this. It is the height of folly to believe that you or I could control alcohol. Why? It's a drug. It's a drug. Drugs have effects on the body. And to think that you can imbibe a drug and it not have effect on the body, it's not going to work. It's a foolish endeavor to try to drink alcohol and say, "I'm in charge of this." Because the second you put it in your system, it is in charge of you. So Solomon warns of the dangers of drinking alcohol. And maybe in our world given to it, maybe we should start listening to Solomon and avoid it altogether. And we probably solve a lot of world problems by doing that. We'd certainly solve personal problems by doing that. And some of the local tragedies that we often read about wouldn't happen if we just avoided something that makes a fool out of us every time we try to put it in our system. All right, so in the next lesson, lesson number 12, we're going to be talking about work. What does it mean to be an employer? What does it mean to be an employee? Solomon talks about that. So we'll talk about that in lesson number 12. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. It's always encouraging to be with you. I hope that you have learned something. And if you have a chance, please come to the real live in-person classes because we have a lot more discussion. It's always great. And we appreciate it so much. Thank you for tuning in. Come back and be with us next week, same time and same channel. And we look forward to it. I love you very much. God loves you even more than I do. I'll see you then. Bye.